Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In, and this needs no introduction. So this is everything you get in the box. You get the IEMs and cable. You also get a very nice large case, a decent assortment of ear tips, and then a cleaning tool. It also comes with a cable strap. So this is Afu's flagship IEM, and it's priced like a flagship IEM at $800. It's got 14 balanced armatures per side, so that's a grand total of 28 balanced armatures. And if you look at the size of the shells, you can see they are a little larger, but as large as they are, it was actually the nozzle length that kind of caught me off guard because they are quite long, longer than what you would typically see with IEMs. Now, of course, this all is by design and it does serve a greater purpose, which I will talk about in a minute. But I saw that, and needless to say, my first thought was that this is going to be interesting. Then I pulled out the included guide, and there was a diagram that showed the proper way to install the tips, along with a recommendation to use the included tips to achieve optimal sound. Of course, being the tip roller that I am, I tried a bunch of my other favorite tips. I mean, I did try their tips first and they worked perfectly fine, but I thought, of course, I might still be able to get an even more comfortable fit and still achieve optimal sound performance with my tips. And it actually worked okay, but after all of that, I still ended up going back to their stock blue tips, and I haven't gone back to mine. All that said, I would still recommend tip rolling because some of you might actually have good results with your tips. Again, although I ended up, just falling back on theirs. But what's interesting is that despite the length of the nozzle and the size of the shell, I was actually able to achieve a very comfortable and secure fit. Now, also they do recommend pushing the ear tips all the way past the metal portion of the nozzle onto the resin portion of the nozzle until the ear tip nozzle is flush with the opening of the ear tip. And it's also very important to try and get as deep of a fit as possible, which I did, and miraculously, again, I have had zero issues with discomfort. So somehow they did manage to figure out a way to get all of the angles and the shapes just right, at least for my ears. But if you have had any fit issues or ear pain in the past with larger IEMs, it's just that might be something you want to take under consideration before you buy it. But for me personally, again, I've had no issues at all. Now, as far as the build quality and design, it's just awesome. They have two different designs to choose from. This is the Starry Night edition, but they also have a beautiful all blue version as well. And it looks a lot like this, but the faceplate is different. It's created with a mixture of, and I was reading about it, ground up seashells, and it has kind of a blue iridescent sparkly look to it. And that version really does have a very high-end look to it. I mean, both versions are absolutely stunning, but I'm really digging this one. And truth be told, I actually got really excited about shooting B-roll for this one. Anyway, the cable is also very nice. The blue nylon jacketing matches the IEMs almost perfectly, and I love the chrome hardware. It just looks really cool. But more importantly, the build quality of the cable is excellent, and it's also very manageable. I've had no issues with tangling at all, and while the cable is a little thicker maybe, it's still feel soft enough and easy enough just to roll up to store in the case. And since the case is also a little on the larger side, they just fit right in perfectly. Speaking of the case, now again, it is larger, but it's really, really well made. And it also has a very soft inner lining, which I love. And again, I know it might not be ideal for travel for some, but for me, I guess it's not a big deal because when I travel, usually I'm flying and I'll take a bunch of IEMs along with me and a larger case to accommodate all of them. And then I just take that on my flight as a carry-on. So typically a case this size isn't going to be an issue for me. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the sound. So again, I probably should just quickly address how crucial it is to get a proper fit with these, because the sound can change pretty significantly. And I noticed for me that when I didn't insert the nozzle in far enough, the treble had a little too much energy. And then when I got the tips all dialed in and got the nozzle in all the way, the treble levels were almost perfect for me. So just be aware that you'll probably need to take a little time choosing your tips and finding that proper depth to get the sound right where you like it. So how did it sound when I achieved what I felt was the optimal fit for me? Well, this takes a very similar approach to its tuning as some of Afu's other releases like the Performer 5 and the Performer 8, in that it has more of a U-shaped presentation with a little less upper mid energy in the Pentagain region. And it also has just a slight tilt downward coming out of the mids into the lower mids. So you have a little more energy around 1K and then a little bit of a slope downward until you reach 300 hertz where it bottoms out. And then it starts to rise again into the mid bass. And while you do have good mid bass energy, the bass tuning on the whole is more sub bass focused. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum in the treble, you have a fairly significant amount of treble energy. So again, this having more of a U-shaped signature, you're going to have more energy in the sub bass and treble, then a little more of a relaxed mid-range presentation. But let's go ahead and break it down a little more, starting with the bass. So as far as its overall bass energy, since the focus is more on the sub bass and less on the mid bass, the presentation is going to have more rumble and more depth as opposed to a punchier and dynamic mid-bass presentation. Not that it doesn't have good dynamics and punch, it does, but that is going to take a little bit of a back seat, so to speak, to the sub bass. It's going to give the sub bass a little more attention. Now, I will say, for this being balanced armature bass, its dynamics, its bass dynamics are very, very impressive. And it reminded me a lot of the Divas in that they managed somehow to pull out or retrieve some of the qualities or attributes that you generally only get from a dynamic driver. Maybe not quite as impressive as the Diva, but pretty close. And what's even more impressive is the transients, the texture, and just the general bass quality. And of course, I always, you know me, I complain about the way some IEMs handle the transition out of the bass into the mids and how, if it's not done properly, it can introduce bass bleed into the mids. Well, that's definitely not the case with the Cantor. This is about as clean as they come, because I'm pretty much getting all of the mid-bass detail and texture I could ever want. Now, I will say I do wish there was just a little more overall bass energy, but that's a nitpick, because in almost every other way, the bass presentation is excellent. Probably the best bass I've heard under $1,000. All that said, if you are more of a bass head and you like a little more of a punchy or dynamic presentation, it's good enough for me, but I don't know if it's going to be good enough for you. It might be a little too polite or tame for you. But if you're looking for something that's more refined and just a clean bass presentation, then this definitely is something that you want to take under consideration. And then as you transition into the mids out of the bass, again, there is no bass bleed at all. So you don't have anything interfering with mid-range details. And while vocals and some of the instruments that land there, again, they do have a little more of a relaxed presentation, they still have plenty of energy as far as it keeping the listener's attention and maintaining that center focus. And that's important for me because with vocals or instruments or whatever it is in any given part of a song that is meant to connect with a listener and maintain that center focus, this does that, and it does it well. But as important, those vocals and instruments need to sound real or natural, and this does that very well too. However, again, I do wish it had just a little more note weight and maybe a little more warmth in the low mids, because while it doesn't necessarily sound thin, and really it's something I didn't even really notice for the most part in most tracks, there were still maybe a few tracks, or at least specific parts on certain tracks, where I would have liked to hear maybe a little more richness in male vocals or in some bass notes. Again, another nitpick, because otherwise the overall mid-range presentation is excellent. So in a nutshell, the mid-range is natural, it's resolving, and it keeps whatever is supposed to be the center of attention right where it's supposed to be, right in the center. Now, I should point out, I do think the Cantor seems to present female vocals a little better than male vocals. Not that there's anything wrong with male vocals, they're still excellent, but there is something about the way it presents female vocals that just takes it up a notch. It's just a little more magical. So if you love female vocals, this is probably going to be a good fit for you. Now, as far as the treble presentation, again, this is where getting the fit just right is pretty important. All that said, the treble presentation is not what I would consider relaxed. It does have some energy, but somehow it still has a smoothness to it and a refinement to it that I rarely hear in a treble presentation that has this much energy, because I'm having a really difficult time finding anything that I can critique about it. It's giving me lots of detail, lots of micro nuances. It has great extension, so I'm hearing nice amounts of air and shimmer. There's also nothing that sounds unnatural or incorrect to me as far as the way it renders cymbals or even some of the higher stringed instruments. Everything that lands there just sounds generally correct. But again, it does have more treble energy, and it does probably land just a little above my tuning preference, or at least closer to the top end of my preference, but maybe still within my preference. Now, in regards to technical performance, well, it's just excellent. The only other IMs that I feel that might be able to outperform it that I have on hand are my Divas and my Hikuyas. And even then, it's not by much. The detail levels are exceptional for this price point. The soundstage is also wide for an IEM, very wide. Vocal and instrument imaging and the spatial cues are very focused and dense. The instrument separation is also very good. It's still very cohesive, so nothing sounds disjointed, but the instruments still occupy their own space within the sound field, and it also has really good forward depth as well. But here's the thing. As you can see, I have quite a few IEMs on my desk, and up to this point, these IEMs have been some of my favorites within the $500 to $800 price point. The IE600 being my favorite V-shape set, under $1,000, then the Noir being my favorite U-shape / neutral IEM, under $1,000, and then the Zhuangwu Gate following not far behind. And all of these sets have a really good technical performance, but I will just say right now that none of them can outperform the Cantor, especially in terms of sheer detail. They do come pretty close, but the Cantor edges all of them out in a head-to-head technical comparison. But of course, as I always say, I prioritize tuning over technical performance. And up until this point, the IM that I've been reaching for the most, as far as what comes closest to my tuning preference, is the Noir. I just love it. But if you remember in my review of the Noir, I did still feel like it was a little bit overpriced. It's priced at $800, exactly the same price as the Cantor. So I guess really the question is, do I feel like the Cantor is overpriced? And the answer is absolutely not. And if anything, it's underpriced, because to me, this is easily kilobuck or higher level tuning and technical performance. And I can only think of a few other IMs that I've heard under, say, 1300 that have impressed me the way the Cantor has. And those are the Helios, the Symphonium Helios, the Monarch MK2, Duna Mirai, and there might be one or two others, but this is right up there competing with IMs that are, again, kilobuck range performance or higher, and even edging close to the Diva in my opinion. But the bottom line is, in my opinion, the Cantor has done something that has not been done for a while, and that is it has raised the bar for IEMs under $1,000. It just has. This is now the IEM to beat under $1,000 in my opinion. So obviously it does get a very, very strong recommendation from me. And shocker, it's an Aful IEM. Not to mention the design is beautiful, the cable is great, the case is great, just an overall great package for $800. So that concludes my review of the Aful Cantor. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please like this video, please comment on this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.